Scraps and more scraps. So much scraps. I didn't have a lot of fabric, so I bought these scrap boxes off my local quilt shop, and now it's time to go through these and organize it and find out what I have, because I don't even know. So I'm just going to be pulling pieces out and then measuring them. This is 2.5 inches, so that's just going to get a good press to get that crease out of there. And I'm going to fold it up and put it in my 2.5 inch strip pile. And then I'm just going to keep pulling from there and finding out what I have. Some of these pieces were cut really wonky, so I'm just going to iron them and try to get them somewhat flatter and see how big of a piece I can get out of there, and then just cut them. My plan going in was to cut everything to 5-inch squares or 2.5-inch squares, or even 10 if I could, and then just the rest would be for crumbs. But I realized fairly quickly that this was going to take me forever, because there is a lot of scraps, and I was at this for over an hour and I barely made a dent on that pile. So I ended up deciding, instead of doing everything squares, I would just do strips. So I decided to do 2.5-inch strips and 5-inch strips, and then that way I could cut them down later if I needed to. And then some pieces I cut down to 2.5-inch squares right away, or 5-inch squares. But I have no idea what I'm going to do with all this stuff. I need some really good ideas for some scrappy quilts. And when I say scrappy, I mean scrappy, not like when you watch a video and they say, oh, here's how to make a scrappy quilt, but everything coordinates perfectly. Well, I don't have that much fabric that coordinates perfectly. I need something that's going to put together a bunch of weird looking fabrics and still look somewhat decent, I guess. So yeah, if you have any ideas or patterns, feel free to let me know in the comments what you would do with all of this stuff. I have 2 big boxes full of these scraps, and then I have some other smaller boxes, and I'm not going to get this done anytime soon. This is going to probably be a very long process to get this all done. But whatever, I'm going to do for sure at least 1 hour every week, if not more. Just cut strips and squares and strings. Yeah, there's a lot of strings in here too, stuff that what I consider a string is less than 2.5 inches wide. People do other stuff too, but that's up to you. So anything that is less than 2.5 inches wide, I just throw in different bins, because, well, I'm trying to organize it somewhat so that I know what I have, and if I find anything in here that might spark an idea, it would be a great time. But if I kind of color coordinate everything and put it in the right piles, I might have a better chance of coming up with ideas, because staring at a box full of, like, jam-packed full of scraps, it's kind of hard to figure out what you're going to do, because you have no idea what's in there and how to coordinate everything. So yeah, I'm just going to keep cutting, keep cutting. These are the little baskets that I got off of Temu. I'm going to use these to somewhat color coordinate my strings. And then if I had like squares that had like a little picture on them, I tried to fussy cut like a 5-inch square out of there if I could. That one had a little sailboat on there, so I figured that would be cute. Those I think I'm going to put on a pile, and then maybe making one of those I Spy quilts maybe one day. I don't know. But if you guys have any ideas, let me know. So some of the pieces in here were actually already cut perfectly to 2.5-inch squares, so saved me some time. Just threw that in my little tray that I have beside me there to put my 2.5-inch squares in, and then cut other stuff that I need. I have a lot of light fabrics. I seen a quilt that Pat Sloan made that she did with 2.5-inch squares. She did aqua and white, I believe, and it looked really good. I would love to do that, but I don't have enough aqua fabric for that. But maybe I'll just figure out what I have here and then make a really scrappy quilt like that. That might look nice. Let me know what you think. And if you have any ideas or pictures, feel free to join my Facebook group. The link is in the description box below. And show me what you've made out of weird, wonky looking scraps. And pieces like this, where I couldn't get a 5-inch square out of, I just cut a 2.5-inch strip as long as I could, and then everything else will just end up going into my crumb bucket for my crumb quilt that I eventually will make one of these days. It's gardening season here, so I don't really have that much time to quilt right now, but I am still trying to make sure that I have time to go and do at least something, because I seriously need to get my sewing room organized. It is a disaster in there. And I also have 3 small children, my oldest 2 love coming into my fabric room and playing with all of these scraps and crumbs. And I do have a bin that I let them play with. That way they leave my other stuff alone. It's a little bit easier to get them to listen if I give them something, instead of just sitting there yelling no, no for everything. So this is what I've done so far. This is my box where I have my 2.5-inch strips, not really color coordinating anything there. These are my 2.5-inch squares. These I am kind of color coordinating with the yellows and the pinks and the reds and so forth. And then I have a nice little pile of 5-inch squares here already cut down to size. And then these are my 5-inch strips so far. And I'm sure I'm going to have a lot more of those, but whatever. And then I have these bins here right now that I'm starting to use for my strings and somewhat color coordinating them with the lights and then the mediums and the darks. But as you can see, I barely made a dent in that pile, and then I have my other big box full yet. Anyways, thank you so much for stopping by and watching.